It is April. It's almost time for the NFL draft, but it's never too late to get in the season of lies. That is the topic because you and I and everybody, all three of us have been doing this long enough. We know every single year we get to April and then we hear stuff like Matt Corral could be a top 5 pick. Now, anything is possible. Kevin Garnett said it, Matt Waldman, but let's start with one of your lies that you've heard or rumblings, kind of misconceptions about this draft class that you're hearing in this month. Because if I didn't hear it in January, I didn't hear it in February, didn't hear it in March at the latest, if I hear it in April, I'm not really believing it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that the quarterbacks are going to actually fall out of the first round, that we aren't going to have at least, 3 or 4 teams that are desperate for it, desperate enough to take it. I think that's probably, I think that's more of a misconception. I think it's hopeful thinking in that sense. I think Bloom, when we were on the couch, you asked me about that and you said, you think it's going to happen? And I'm just, I'll, when I see it, I believe it. And that's kind of where I'm at. I love the idealistic thinking that maybe they've looked at this class and figured out that this isn't the class to draft in the first round. But I think that there's going to be at least a few teams that feel like that clock is striking 12 on happy hour and the beer goggles are in full effect.
No, that's what happens in the NFL draft. It's FOMO, Bloom. Fear of missing out. I was talking to someone, I'll tell you guys off air who it was, that deals his show in Vegas is, about Vegas things. I guess we're on YouTube and not on the air, so I can say I was talking to a guy that does a better show. And he was like, hey, 5 quarterbacks in the first round? I was like, what? Excuse me, what? I'd take 2 and I would push it to 3 maybe, right. But the season of lies is definitely here. So I was like, dude, where'd you hear that? And then he told me where I heard it from. I was like, oh, don't believe that guy. He's terrible. Right. That guy is awful. So, yes, hopefully correcting some misconceptions, but 5 QBs in the first, no thanks.
Yeah, I think that, and in this new era where, cease betting, draft props, this draft knowledge, all this time we thought draft knowledge was just for the nerds, the football nerds that just wanted to hang around and talk football when there wasn't any games to talk about. And now you can make money. You can make good money. And there are a lot of people out there making good money. And I agree with you, Cease. I think 2.5, maybe 3.5 is where you set the quarterback first round prop to make it interesting. Wide receivers, I'd say 5.5, maybe 6.5 is where you set it to make it interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see whether teams blink or not about these quarterbacks, which as always is going to come down to the evaluation and what they think of the rest of the class. But going back to your original question, Cease, something you've heard that you just don't believe. I don't believe the Jags are going to take Travon Walker number 1. No. They're going to take Aiden Hutchinson. And I don't know why this is being floated. Maybe Roger Goodell in the league saying, we need some intrigue for number 1. We need people to tune in as soon as the draft starts. So it isn't like Jacksonville or no quarterback marquee names is going to get folks to tune in. So give us something. That's the best explanation I can come up with. Walker is certainly a player with a high ceiling. One would argue the highest ceiling out of those top 3 edge, along with Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, Hutchinson out of Michigan. However, Travon Walker is not the kind of player that you would take number 1 overall. There's some have talked about Trent Baalke and taking Aldon Smith. That wasn't number 1 overall. That wasn't a team coming off of the kind of terrible year that the Jags had as an organization. So I just don't believe it. Although I'll say this, if it does happen, I'll be so thrilled for Lions fans. I'll be so thrilled for the organization because geographically it's a fit. The way he plays the game, it's a fit. It's a fit. Not that the Lions should be disappointed if they have to take one of those other 2 edge prospects, defensive line prospects. But I think the Jacksonville hemming and hawing about number 1 talk just has to be a lie.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those things because now the made-for-TV stuff, Matt, and I think that's a good jumping-off point from what Sigmund had to say. Is like you've got so much TV. This is a TV event. This will get better ratings than the NBA Finals, than the World Series, and then the Stanley Cup Final, the NFL Draft. This guy's getting picked. It's incredibly boring, but I love it and I eat it up, and all of us do, right? Obviously, so. How much does that TV push make it like put some intrigue here? And I remember what was it, Jake Long, like in 2008, whatever, where it's just like, oh, we know, everybody knows. Wasn't he? Didn't he negotiate before the draft?
Yeah,
Wasn't that the case? Right. And they kind of, I don't know if they allow that anymore. Maybe they do, and just nobody's done it. But the made-for-TV thing has caused more, drama or lies. And remember, everybody. Agents run the news cycle. We're seeing multiple people, even people that I adore and appreciate and were my mentors, taking it on the chin this offseason because agents are just telling them stuff. They're running with it, and it's turning out to be bad for them. So we won't get into that too much, Matt. But I think the made-for-TV thing also causes this season of lies.
Well, absolutely, because now you have a year-long news cycle, and that's exactly what the NFL wants. I mean, the more that you can keep people talking about the NFL year round, the more money they're going to make. The more that they can show, advertisers what, how much sway the NFL has and how it's a year-long storyline, and then they can charge more for, their deals with TV. And that's where they really make so much of their money. So the fact that they've made an event out of all of this whole process of the combine, and that I'm surprised. I guess probably because they just can't get enough camera people and reporters to probably do pro days. If they could, they would probably make pro days more of an event than as much of an event as they make the combine in certain respects. But it certainly does create opportunities now, and it creates a vacuum of opportunities to manipulate things, and that's what agents get to do. They're trying to sell their client, and the more that they can sell their client and more opportunities they have to do that in front of national TV or national media, they're gonna do that. That's their job. It's like you may call them sharks, you may have pejorative ideas about who they are, but just like sharks, if you basically put a dead whale in the water, they're gonna have a frenzy, and that's basically what the NFL is. That's what's going on here. Is you have the opportunity for them to take advantage of it.
Yeah, they want that frenzy, Bloom, and that's why. Did they move the schedule release back last year too? Didn't it used to be like the middle of April? I remember doing schedule release shows on the air that were like middle of April, and now it's like going to be in the beginning of May. Mm-hmm. So there goes that calendar. And don't get them tempted, Matt, because Sigmund, if they could put more cameras, if they could somehow, afford it, the NFL can't afford it. But if they could make pro days like a fan event, that's my last bastion of like safety, that and the Shrine Bowl, right? Because the Senior Bowl is so damn touristy now. Still great, still fantastic, and Nagy does a fine job running the game. Fine talent, obviously, it's the Senior Bowl. But things are a little too touristy now in draft coverage. And yes, Bloom, get off my lawn.
Yeah. First of all, I want to mention that it looks like that they're going to ferry players across a little river or something to get to the stage for the draft.
Yes, because it's at Caesars. Actually a really good friend of mine sets up all that kind of stuff for the NFL, for the Super Bowl and stuff. And he told me that it's at Caesars, but then they're going to ferry the players over, and then they're going to like ferry them back. Because obviously, I'm just wondering, like, well, where's the media going to sit? I'm not going this year because, well, the Broncos don't have a first round pick. But either way, like, yes, there is a little Vegas-y, a little extra Vegas-y.
Right. It's Vegas.
You know what I mean?
It's Vegas. So there you go with the TV-ification of everything. Although I couldn't help but think of the River Styx.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. It's there. It's right there. It's low-hanging fruit. And then someone said, you have too much time on your hands. Look, the other side of it, you mentioned Pro Day, Cease. I went to a Pro Day. I covered a Pro Day that was absolutely a fan event. It was Robert Griffin III's Pro Day at Baylor. And it was the resurgence of the Baylor program. I think it was before they had built the new stadium, was when he really put the program back on the map. And it was a massive event. And I do think at some of the big schools, it is that kind of event. However, it's, I think, more for fans of the college program than NFL fans. And like we've always talked about, if the draft season was packaged, marketed the correct way as a season with a plot and stories that unfold and a payoff at the end of resolution, which then is just the cliffhanger for the next season, right? The playing season, which and then rinse repeat. I think it can become something that it doesn't have to be in a cheap, sensational way, but in a more intellectual, analytical way, or a way just to become more in touch with the teams and the strategy. I've said this twice already this week. I was on a show with Paul Perticchese. We love Paul. We love Matt Caraccio. What's up, guys? And Chris Trapazzo, that the beautiful thing about the draft, and why I think in the end, why it's my first love when it comes to football, is you can talk about any subject football related via the draft, no matter what it is. The financial side, right? Positional value, team building, game theory, right? All of it. Where the game is, where is the game headed? Good organizations and bad organizations and how they make decisions, and so on and so forth. So there's a reason, Cease, that it outdraws those culminations of the actual sports. And I think that it also, there's other layers here about tribalism, and I think football preserves the tribalism in our DNA and arouses it more than any of the other sports, and people's connection to their team and their community. You always want to know what they're doing. You always want to know what they're doing. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And maybe I'm saying that because if I say it is a bad thing, then what does that mean about what we're doing? Glorifying the NFL, encouraging people to be like us and spend too much time thinking about it and not getting paid for it like us, not actually being able to help support our families with it. But I think that it's always that struggle. I know we had a conversation about this at the end of one of our shows in the last few months, Cease, that it's always that struggle between the forces that try to exploit and extract and manipulate, but then the actual soul that's at the center of it, that is the glimmer of light that always draws us in. And let's focus on, like the story you told about Trey McBride, Cease. Let's focus on the human stories. Let's focus on the triumph of people, of families, of programs, of communities that this represents. And if people are trying to exploit that for their gain, well, that's just the nature of the human world. There's nothing really that is truly free from that. But at the same time, we always see that the human soul will triumph in the end.
Sigmund, preach. I wish there was well, let's raise an offering, right? Let's pass around the basket. I'll throw in some cash, Matt, because here's what Sig is pointing at, Matt, and I'll be a little more blunt, as I usually am. There's a lot of jackasses that try to cover the NFL draft because anybody can watch film. It doesn't mean that you are actually understanding what you're seeing when it comes to prospects.
Well, I mean, it takes a while to do that. And I think that I love people who want to make the attempt and get into doing it. But it is something that it's not going to give you 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years is probably not going to get you where you want to be with it. Though I'm certainly, if you do all the right things for clicks, you may get the clicks, but you may not get the respect. And I think that that's something that takes time to do in terms of, because you have to develop your chops with it. It just takes time. But I love what Bloom had to say about all of this. And I mean, I think when it comes down to it, we still say, it was me who said that. And I'll say this, I think that with the way the media does this, I feel like that really football has turned its media into a patriarchal influenced version of The View. And, in a lot of ways, that's kind of where we're at. And I think with the draft, the way we talk about some of this, I almost feel like we need Nick and Vanessa Lachey to come on and do like Love is Blind. Because really, that's, in some respects, I feel like the draft is now a football version of that Netflix show. But, overall, it's just one of those things that you're going to have. The media is set up this way. The media is set up to where, how do we get cheap labor to begin with? So cheap labor are going to be young people. And we were all started off this way. We all had the arrogance. You need to have it in some supply to say, hey, I can do this. I look at these slappies who are doing it. Could be the three of us they were looking at, could be a bunch of other folks, and say we could do this just as well. And then you discover over that time that it does take some work, that it does take some craft to develop to get into some of these avenues. And certainly, the baseline of fans are really just here to have fun. When they think, I hear this all the time. I know Russ Landy's heard it all the time, and I've told this story in the past, but I think it's good for here is that, you get asked someone meets you who's familiar with your work, and man, I would love to sit down and watch film with you. And I'm like, nah, man, you really wouldn't. And they're like, no, I really would. Like, I want to do this. And somebody did this with Russ, and Russ told the story on my podcast. He said, I said, okay, well, sure. If you really want to do this, come meet me at my house Saturday morning at about 7 a.m. We're going to spend the day watching film. Guys like super pumped, They get there, start watching some film. He breaks down like one player. It's noon by now, and they're into the halftime. And the guy goes, man, yeah, that's a lot. You've been watching the same player like so many times, just looking at one thing, one play. I'm getting kind of tired. When are we going to have lunch? Russell's like, well, I was just going to head to the kitchen and get my sandwich out here. If you want one, we can do that. And he's like, and he just looked at Russ at that point and just was like, yeah, dude, this isn't for me. And I think that the difference is, that's the difference between watching film when people aren't clicking and hearting your work on social media, and when you're actually doing it to try and deliver analysis that's in the long term. And that there's entertainment and then there's analysis, and we try to blend both, but sometimes it can fall heavily towards entertainment if you're not putting enough craft in it. But if you're dancing and you're singing along to music, and you're doing things that make it fun for people, that's cool. But people will always gravitate towards that. And then when folks really get into it and start thinking along the lines Bloom does about this, then you might go, well, where do I find someone who's doing it from that perspective? And then you start winnowing that down to, a handful of people like Dane Brugler or Jordan Reed or folks like that.
It is the Audible Live. We're talking about the season of lies in the NFL draft. And Bloom, I heard 0 running backs in January in the first round. I heard 0 running backs in February in the first round. I heard 0 running backs in March in the first round. And then April rolls around and it's, well, there might be like a couple backs taken in the first round. Again, maybe one, maybe. If you're Kansas City, what the hell are you doing? Right? Like, seriously. And God bless Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but you got to run the ball, man. Like, Kansas City should draft just for the playoffs. The regular season, they're fine. Although there's some chaos behind the scenes in Kansas City that they need to clean up. I don't know if they will, but we'll see if they would do. Bloom. But how about running backs in the first round? Where do you stand on this latest rumor?
None. If it's a 0.5 prop bet, which is where it should be set, take the under. Buffalo is your chance here. Breece Hall probably. Yeah. But maybe Tampa, tiny chance. Tampa, because they seem to draft a few years ahead. They're okay with taking a luxury pick based on their current roster. But no, I don't think we're going to see a running back in the first round. And the reality is, even that 5th-year option that, say, the Giants have with Saquon Barkley, is it even an asset? What can they get for it? A 4th-round pick? I mean, they're not even going to get, they're probably going to get basically, well, I don't even know if Barkley's going to be a 4th-round comp pick next year. Depending on how he plays, he might have to just play another 1-year prove-it deal. His comp pick might not even be a 4th-round pick. But the point is that a running back that I don't know what different rooms around the league thought about Barkley, whether they would have taken him in the top 10 or what they thought about the Giants taking him where they did. I don't think that 5th year of cost control matters for a running back. Sure, you can run him into the ground, and yes, that 5th-year option is cheap because running back salaries are so cheap. But at the same time, what's Melvin Gordon going to get on the open market when he finally signs? Like $2 or $3 million?
Maybe.
Right? Maybe. So it's fungible. I mean, I feel bad for the running backs out there. If you're a running back right now in high school or even in your first year or two of college, you should be looking to switch to cornerback, to wide receiver.
Wide receiver, yeah.
Yeah, something. Even maybe linebacker. Because
Unless you love playing running back.
Well, and see, that's where we get into the soul part of it, right? And not the analytical part of it. So no, and I think that Dane Brugler, who's already been mentioned a few times on the show, his 7-round mock just came out, and he said he's going to have a final mock. He has the first running back going off the board, 43 to Atlanta, Breece Hall. He has Kenneth Walker going 57 to Buffalo. The next running back he has off the board isn't until 98, New Orleans taking Tyler Algier. And then, Zamir White and James Cook, these guys are third-day guys. Isaiah Spiller, Kyron Williams, Damian Pierce, Pierre Strong, Tyler.
And you're mentioning some really good names, by the way.
Abram
Players
Smith.
I'm excited about. Kyron Williams.
Right. Brian Robinson in the 5th round. Jerome Ford in the 6th round.
That's Alabama back in the 5th round, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, well, Rashad White, Ty Davis Price, 6th round picks, Hassan Haskins, 7th round picks, Snoop Connor, Quan White, Ty Chandler, Keontae Ingram. Point is, it's a third-day draft for running backs. For a running back to get into the first round now, I mean, it has to be just a bulletproof prospect like Najee Harris. And some might argue that probably wasn't the right pick for the Steelers. Did it really make them a better team? Is it going to make them a better team? So I'm afraid it's so funny. I'm going to do a mini rant here. Okay, I'm going to do a mini rant. So many times, all of us, and I'll include myself in it, because what is fantasy football if it isn't saying I know better, right? I can do better. I know better than somebody else. They say the draft's a crapshoot, or they'll say teams don't know what they're doing. Or teams are narrow-minded. And as Matt Waldman has been telling us for years, whatever the worst workplace you've worked in, there are teams, commanders that are that bad, that the workplaces are that bad. Maybe some others too.
Cowboys.
However, right? Oh man, yeah, yes. Man, how is it that the Cowboys story went under the radar about the cheerleader and Rich Dalrymple? I'm gonna just keep saying that so folks go look it up. Yeah. Sure. Watch that. By the way, was a little Easter egg. If you watch the video, I'm not going to say what just happened. Go back to YouTube and watch the video. So there are teams that are that bad, but people saying running backs don't matter. Don't give running backs second contracts. Don't take running backs in the first round. Most organizations, I think, figured this out. Probably figured it out a while ago. And likewise, I see a lot of stuff about age. Okay. I think it was John Moore who originally did a lot of good stuff with age as an attribute. And I had gotten a good conversation with someone, I can't remember who it is now, about when we look at players' senior film, and this would be a good RSP question for you, Matt, that we should not compare it to other players' junior film. And that players that stay until their last year, we should do apples to apples comparisons. And then this gets into like Chris Olave, for instance, and some of the other prospects in this draft, that if you're comparing their senior year or their age 23 year to someone else's age 20 year, you're doing them a disservice. But again, I think if you look at the NFL, and the answer in the conversation ended up being a good one, which is let's just compare apples to apples. Let's compare their third year to the third year of a prospect, second year to second year. And a player like Olave was excellent all the way through. Right. So there's not really this worry that, well, he just is inflating his draft stock. Maybe it's a little bit more of a worry for, say, Kenny Pickett or somebody who didn't show as much until that last year. But quarterback is a whole different conversation in general. My point is the NFL this isn't really a mini rant at all. It's a longer rant. The NFL is tuned into this stuff, or at least the good organizations. And they were tuned into this stuff long before we were talking about it. And I think that we should be a little more humble and give a little more credit. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about behind closed doors has been talked about for a long time.
It has, and it will continue to be so. It is the Audible Live, talking about the season of lies. That is the NFL Draft. Unpaid endorsement. I got a mini beast. I saw that because I want to support the work of our friend Dane Brugler.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember when Dane came up under Chad Ryder with NFLDraftScout.com, which was a fantastic site. And what Rob Rang and Chad Ryder did for years at that site was phenomenal through all the different iterations, and you had to go find it. And it's still kind of out there, but it's not the same. Yeah, when Dane came up under Chad, and he would watch film, and his payment was seasons of college football on hard drives. So he came up under Chad Ryder, man, and that's a longtime friend of all of ours. So when I saw this, now I already got the Beast. I subscribed to the Athletic just because of the Beast. But I saw this little mini Beast. It's like little mini. So it's not terribly thorough with the player analysis like the Beast is, but it's a little handbook. I give it to my media friends who are. Well, this shows their interest in the draft. I'm pouring through the RSP. I'm pouring through the Beast. And I'm obviously watching film myself. But we always love our guy, Dane Brugler. Love our guys here in the chat room. And ladies and gentlemen in the chat room, welcome into the show. We've got about 10 minutes left in today's show. So I wanted to bring up something that I brought up last night on Nick and Cecil. And it has to do with what you were talking about, Bloom. Teams are ahead of this because right now the media narrative is the draft doesn't matter. They're trading away all these picks. Look at all these picks. The salaries, though, that wide receivers are getting, the salaries that quarterbacks are getting, there's going to be a pendulum that swings. Now, we'll be chasing it like the dog chases the car, right? The media will be chasing it. Teams are already anticipating this. Matt, I think while the popular narrative, the lie this year, is the draft doesn't matter. Look at all these teams trading away their picks. They just don't care about the draft. The good teams are the ones that are going to know they have to draft well. They must draft well because wide receivers are making $25 million a year now or more. Quarterbacks, there's 6 quarterbacks making $40 million a year or more. Derek Carr being number 6. That number is going to grow when Russell Wilson gets his, $50 million a year deal. So because teams have to invest, and salary cap doesn't go up that much, right? What's it go up every year, guys? Like 10 million, whatever. Because of that, because of these inflated salaries, not at running back, but for pass rushers, for tackles, for wide receivers, for corners, obviously quarterbacks, fully guaranteed deals are going to turn the attention back towards the NFL draft. So the smart teams, Matt, are going to know that the draft is still incredibly important because that's where you get your young, cheap talent.
Yeah, and again, it's still also a good class along the offensive line. So, I know that sometimes some media don't realize that there are actually 5 guys that play, along in front of the quarterback and inside of the wide receivers and in front of the running back, and that we don't fantasize everything when it comes to football, that these guys actually matter most. So when you're talking about, and then there's also, the fact that most players only have a 2-3 year window. Most coaches and GMs only have a 2-3 year window. So the only thing that the draft may not matter to ultimately, if we're going to take it literally, would be the owners, who basically, unless they are cooking the books, they probably will stay in the league and not get fired from their own teams.
Right.
Exactly. So as a result of that, you have to make every draft count. If anything, this draft is more important than previous drafts because it's going to be more challenging to find the talent who can be impactful during your tenure to at least be able to extend your lifetime in that role. So it is. Think about Russell Wilson. Think about the fact that yes, the Seattle Seahawks got Matt Flynn as a free agent the year that they drafted Russell Wilson, and when he rose up against Cecil, and initiated a bro down, Wilson was really, his salary early on allowed Seattle to be able to retain players, very important players, so that they could have a defense and have a decent enough offense around him so that he could do the, kind of maximize his skills, at least in the early portion of his career. And now that he's at a point that is, that he's worth way more than that, now we're, of course, now he's in Denver because Seattle couldn't really afford to roll with him on that level.
Bloom, what do you think about this topic?
Well, I think what we're looking at here, first of all, as Matt mentioned about tackles, I think we're going to see a kind of a parade, because I'm down in New Orleans. I think of everything like a parade, right? So quarterbacks were leading the parade, the drum major, right? And they're still leading the parade. Derek Carr just got $40 million a year. But second up, wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. And what that means is instead of quarterbacks, although we may still see a team or two trade back into the first to get a quarterback in that cost-controlled fifth year. I'm talking to Paul P. today. He said, hey, with teams making up their mind about quarterbacks by end of year 3, does the fifth-year option even matter for a quarterback? Because if you have a fifth-year option for a quarterback you want to keep, well, you're not hopefully going to have to make them play on it anyway. You're going to sign them to the extension and lock it in as early as you can, because the longer you wait, we're going to see what happens with Lamar Jackson and Baltimore on this front. So maybe wide receiver is the position where we end up seeing a 6th, a 7th wide receiver in the first round to get that cost control fifth year. But what's coming next? Offensive tackle, cornerback, edge rusher. The next year, we're probably going to see the $25 million wide receiver, but we're also going to probably see the $25 million corner. I haven't looked ahead to next year's cornerback class, right? Edge, tackle. It's coming, though. It's coming.
Well, I want to
Can
I interject just a very important part of this, because Bloom raises great points here with all of this. And then it goes to this fact with defenses now playing all of this cover 2 and they want to do more drop 8. Then where is the smart team going to go? They're not going to be picking the 6th wide receiver in the first round. They're going to be looking at all these big running backs that the media says, well, they're old school running backs. Let's see if we can get one of those guys cheap after we load up on our offensive line and just shove the ball down the throat of these defenses. And then suddenly 3 years from now, we might end up with media saying running backs matter again, you know, because the two teams that were the exception to the rule are now in the Super Bowl, even though every year it's
and like 3 years after that, Matt, we'll see oh my God, that running back got a big contract. Bloom, continue.
Yeah, so the pendulum continues the cycle. It's all circles. If you span back far enough, it's all circles, turtles all the way down, and so on. So I think that's something to watch. But I don't know the numbers, and somebody who is much more versed in the CBA can school me on this. But I do not believe that rookie contracts in the first round go up at the same rate as the salary cap. In a fair world, if the salary cap went up 5%, then the first round rookie contracts would go up 5%, right? That's not happening. I think that the rookie contract between Trevor Lawrence and whoever the Jags take this year is only going to go up like 1.3%. And the cap did not go up only 1.3%. So that's going to make having players locked in on rookie contracts even more valuable. I mean, it's just a game, folks. Just think of it as a game where you have this much money, just like an auction draft. What's up, Drew Davenport, the best auction analyst at Footballguys and maybe in fantasy football. So if you know, I mean, we've all done at least one auction draft in our time, right? If you know you only have $200 to work with, especially if you do auction drafts that have a salary cap contract aspect, like a dynasty aspect, where it's not just getting this player at $2 in the auction this year, but it's getting the player at $2 and being able to lock them in for 4 years in a salary that only goes up like 50 cents every year or something like that. So you're right, Cease. The teams that just can do math, can you do math? will know that the value of locking in players on first round contracts is more valuable the more the cap goes up. And that, I think, is something that's going to be interesting to watch as we see how teams value these first round picks. And I think there's always a layer to this that we aren't understanding. Like the Saints pick, for instance, or the Eagles. The Saints and Eagles trade, which we haven't really talked about in depth on this show, guys. For the Eagles, I think it was just as simple as having 3 first-round picks on the same schedule of salary escalation. It doesn't really work out that well. To have 3 guys that you're going to have to take first, 5th-round option decisions on. 3 guys you might have to extend with their big second contract, right? It just makes sense to spread that out. Right? Whereas the Saints are looking at it more like, and I don't think the Saints are going to move up for Malik Willis. I don't think that's the maneuvering they're doing. I think the Saints are looking at it more like, because of our salary cap right now, problems, the only way we really have to have an infusion of talent is through the draft, cost controlled talent, and they want to be competitive now, so they want to push it forward. So I think the smart organizations, again, are thinking about things this way, but it's very simple if you start to do the math. You can even talk yourself into taking a shot on one of these quarterbacks when you see the payoff. As I said yesterday on Twitter, there's only one position that allows you to bank $100+ million of surplus production right now. And that's the quarterback position. Because if you have a starting quarterback like Mac Jones, okay, even if Mac Jones is mediocre, even if he's mediocre Mac Jones, he probably is still worth $25 million a year on the open market, right? Jimmy Garoppolo money. That's $125 million. I don't have off the top of my head what the Patriots contract is for him, but I'm pretty sure that it's not going to come in that much more. I mean, maybe $100 million was a little bit of an exaggeration. My point is that if you just do the math, there's no other proposition that allows you to win by $100 million than taking a quarterback. But soon enough, we're going to say the same thing about offensive tackle. We're going to say the same thing about edge rusher. And I think that's why you're going to see, when we were doing the first round of the draft, Cecil, maybe you can join us. I don't know, since there's no Denver first round pick.
Actually, I saw our draft schedule, and I love it, by the way. But I will be talking from 2 p.m. till midnight that day.
Wow. Well, I mean, your name is on the billboard now, right? That's close enough. So you got to do something to live up to the billboard. My point is, what are we going to see in the draft? We're going to see in the first 12, 13 picks. What, guys? 4 edge, probably. Jermaine Johnson will be the 4th.
Hey, I have 6 in the top 20.
At least three tackles in the top 10, top 12.
Yeah.
You're probably going to see 3 corners in the top 15. I think Trent McDuffie could be the second cornerback. Certainly you're going to see 3. So right there, guys, that's more than half of the top 15 is going to be those positions. And I think that the clues are all there. It's just deciphering the data in a way that you understand, because you're thinking of it in the context that the teams have when they're making these decisions.
It is the Audible Live, footballguys.com, and make sure you check out the rest of our YouTube channel. We've got great shows. Audio-wise, you will notice we're pushing something different this year, because we've had all of our shows in the Audible feed on Apple Music, on Spotify, etc. Now each show is going to get their own feed. So we're going to keep everything together until June 1. So then if you listen to the Dynasty show, subscribe to the Dynasty show's feed, the Dynasty newsletters feed. Launchpad with Dave Kluge, Mailbag, like all of these shows will have their own feed, and the Audible will be the Audible. It'll be us. So thank you guys for listening, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, however you take in your podcast. We appreciate you for watching here on our YouTube channel. You watch the video to the end. It helps the algorithm, and like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Matt, rookie scouting portfolio. You want to bone up on a draft. It takes about 2 weeks to get through the RSP. So now is the time to go to mattwaldmanrsp.com.
Sure. And the nice part about it is, whether it's a dynasty or redraft situation, it's a nice resource that you'll be able to use during your fantasy season to pick up waiver wire picks when major media is like, who was that guy? We never saw that coming. You can read about those players and see where maybe they have, that talent meeting the opportunity, and be able to take advantage of that. And, available at mattwaldman.com.
And Sigmund Bloom, you'll be getting that draft show ready with a bunch of star-studded guests.
Yeah, and Bloom 100 should be out tonight, certainly tomorrow. For
get it out before that Pelicans game.
Yeah, you got the Pelicans against the Clippers, and it's great. It's really great, and I think at this time of year, it's always a fun time. I was reminiscing with Chris Trapazzo. I think it's always a fun time. I know, Matt, we were just reminiscing about the draft that you came to New York City and had your RSP there, and we were working the floor. Cecil, we could reminisce about any number of things, and just to see how far this community has come, how far this conversation has come. Did y'all ever think we would have as many people to talk about this in depth about these subjects as we do now compared to 15 years ago? How many people were that we could have had conversations where people would have even cared or understood or wanted to go as deep as we go?
Most of them were like the guy I was sitting next to up in Madison Square Garden who waited in line all night, and then when he saw that Darius Hayward-Bay wasn't drafted by the Jaguars, he got mad, stood up, took his shirt off. It was the only shirt he had on, threw it down on the ground in the aisle, and walked out of Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
that was
wow.
That was
Which
my
actually
first draft experience.
Which actually, Matt, Cecil, indulge me and allow me a minute here just to be indulged. Actually, I'm going to say the TVification. Cecil, I'm going to come all the way back around to your rant about the TVification.
It's a callback in the movie industry.
It is. Yes, we're doing a callback. Because it is sad, actually. One of the things that's lost is if you did make it to any of the drafts when it was every year in New York City at the Radio City Music Hall or wherever they would have it, it was really a cult event. It was a cult event for the true sickos like us and people who were sickos about their team. And it was a circus atmosphere, and not a circus, a made-for-TV circus, like an actual circus, an actual freak show. And when you
early days skateboarders,
exactly, I mean, we were weird, and we all knew it, and we loved it. And Bert Sugar and all these guys, the people who've been there for a long time, and then the fans that have been coming year after year after year that Matt described. And I think that is something that is still the roots of this. It's a callback to the Shark Pool, to the Footballguys message board. And I think that those of us that got our first intro to way too in-depth thinking and talking about football, that was the place we got it. So it's good that the kernel of that is there. The roots are there. And certainly with all of us old fogies on this show, you have to have somewhat of a liking to it to want to hang out with us like folks do. So yeah, Bloom 100's coming out. We'll be live all night, round one, usual hijinks, reacting in real time, and it's outstanding. The NFL somehow finds a way to be more and more stimulating, even though there's more and more layers that are in view that are problematic. But I think it's up to us to keep that soul intact, and the two of you do it. Our audience does it. Joe Bryant creates an atmosphere where that's always an emphasis in the work that we do, and I hope we can just continue to do it for a long time.
Will your
It
gas
is
mask
the Audible.
be
The gas, Matt. Give him the gas face. Yeah. Before the draft, before we go on the air, Matt. Always before.
Okay. All right. Always before. That's right. Never more than one gummy an hour. Anyway, it is the Audible Live, everyone. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt Waldman. Follow us all on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and blah, 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 blah. Everything. We thank you very much for doing that. Again, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid, and watch Casually Comics when you get a chance. Anyway, we're all awesome. You're all awesome. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. I'm Cecil Lammey for the fellas and the ladies saying thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. And I command that you stay frosty.